Brad Peterson, longtime high school football coach, and then worked on the staff for Dan Mullen, Joe Moorhead, and Mike Leach. And what a I think he could write a book after doing that. And he joins us on the Yuengling Lager guest line. Brad Peterson, good morning, my friend.
Good morning, Bo.
All right. Look, you were a coach for a long time. You had structured hours. You were an assistant coach, but then you were a head coach for a long time. Then you worked for Dan Mullen, Joe Moorhead, and Mike Leach. You went on this 12-day excursion with Coach Leach when he got hired to take him around and introduce him to everybody in the state, high school, junior college coaches. Talk about how vastly different his schedule was compared to Dan Mullen's.
First of all, he didn't have a schedule. And I mean, listen, Spurrier told me, he was like, listen, I'm telling you, when you go somewhere, you better get a key to his room. And if you want to leave at 11, you better tell him 10. He said, I'm not joking. I mean, and he started telling some stories of, him having to go in and literally get him. And so anyway, our very first, he gets here, and so that Sunday is Martin Luther King weekend. And so that Sunday, that afternoon night, we took off, and actually our very first stop was at Dylan Johnson's house. And so I drive. Bo, you there?
Yeah, I got you, buddy.
Okay. I didn't. I'm sorry. So anyway, so I drive over there. They fly in the plane, pick them up. We go see Dylan. We take off from there. We go to Rolling Fork and see Caleb Ducking. We go to Grenada to see Forbes. We're hitting all these at one time. And we end up in Jackson at the Weston. And so we stay at the Weston. And so the next day we're supposed to go down to Brookhaven area to see Grant Jackson. And I knew, so I had scheduled it for like noon. I thought, well, for surely we'll be there at 12 o'clock. So, I tell Coach, hey, listen, we're going to be there. So we need to leave here at 11 o'clock. And he's like, okay, got it. I'm not going to tell a grown man,
sure,
10 o'clock when I really mean 11, because if he'd have come down at 10, I'd have been in a bind, trying to figure out what to do for an hour. Well, I sit there and 11 o'clock, 11:15, 11:30, he ain't come down. And by 11:45, I've called Dave Emmerich. I'm like, Dave, you got to call Coach. We got to go. And Dave just starts laughing. And I'm like, Dave, this ain't funny. We got a schedule. We got Coach. He's like, Brad, there ain't no schedule. And I'm like, my gosh. Well, about 12:05, Coach texts me and he's like, is there any coffee down there? I'm like, yeah. I said, do you want it black? And he never responds. So I go and get him some coffee. And, of course, I'd been up since 8 o'clock.
Sure.
And I'd already gone and got coffee and just waiting around thinking he'd come back. Anyway, he comes down at about 10 after 12, and I hand him his coffee, and he looks at me and said, you don't drink coffee? I'm like, yes, sir. I had mine about 4 hours ago. We're good. Hey, we go. Now, once you got him in the house, you could get him, keep him on schedule, because you'd be like, hey, all right, Coach, we got to roll. He was good, but that night, that Monday night, we ended up in Biloxi at Jaden Wally's house, and that may have been the funniest thing. But we go into Wally's house, and again, it was Martin Luther King's birthday, and so we were not in school. Kids were not in school, so Wally had been hunting all day, and so he's wearing camouflage. And he sits there, and Coach Leach gets to ask him, like, now what kind of hunting you been doing? Cause we've been, deer hunting, and Coach Leach started talking about, man, I can't be that still and patient. And Wallace said, no, because we're running dogs. And then in Leach fashion, I'm talking about what happens when the dog catches the deer? And he starts, and everybody's laughing like, Coach, dog don't catch the deer. So, well, what happens when you shoot the dog? And he's just cutting up, but they are rolling, and we're rolling. And so, anyway, yeah, it was a great 12 days for sure. And like I said, that night we went up at Mary Mahoney's and hung out there with a good group. And so the night before, when we were at the Weston, like I said, we sat there, and it was Spurrier and Mealy and Mason Miller and myself, and may have been one more, I don't remember. And of course, we stayed up, late. That was like the Weston bar closes at 10, but Coach convinced the bartender to stay there with us,
yeah.
and that was my first experience, first night. And the funny thing that night is, he's sitting there, and I mean, he's just talking about Key West and telling stories, and he's looking dead Mason Miller in the face, and and he's talking, and I'm watching, and I see Mason start texting, recruiting whatever. I thought, oh boy, that didn't mean that. All he did was turn to Spurrier then and kept finishing the story. Spurrier gets up and goes to the bathroom right in the middle of what he's saying. And he just turns to Mealy and just as long as somebody is there, he was going. And then he would stop, and you had about 45 seconds where you could say something.
Right.
And then there he goes again on whatever. But so like I said, we stayed up really late that night, and then that Monday night, we leave Mary Mahoney's about midnight. And I thought, oh boy, hey, we're headed in. As soon as we walk in the hotel, he takes a hard left and goes and just sits down, and expects me and Spur to come sit down with him, and we did. And just another hour and a half of listening to stories, and I mean that was every night.
You could write a book on those 12 days, Brad Peterson.
Well, it is etched in my memory forever. I'll tell you that.
Wow, and that had to be. I mean, you're a coach, and you worked under structured coaches prior to that. That just had to blow your mind that someone didn't really have a schedule, because that's what coaching is. You had already been a head coach. You had lived on a schedule for 20 years, right? Absolutely.
I mean, it was unreal. The night that Ross Dillinger wrote about when we were in Hattiesburg, which we can go. I was going to quick details on that. First of all, we get to Hattiesburg, and a lot of times when I'd go to Hattiesburg, if I had Joe with me or Coach Leach, and I'd be like, hey Jay Hobson, who's head coach of Southern Miss, and I'd do the same thing if we were down there with Will Hall or wherever. I said, hey, we're in town. Coach would like to meet you, and Jay was like, come to our house. Well, we go to Hobson's house that night, got there about 9 o'clock. We'd been in Waynesboro earlier, and Michelle, Jay's wife, fixed us, me and Coach, something to eat, had a plate ready for us. We ate. Well, Jay, they get to talking, where you from? Well, Cody, Wyoming. And Jay asked about Yellowstone, and that was it. Coach then for the next hour and a half, he's standing up. He drew a map of Yellowstone, and he's telling Jay where to go in, where to stay the first night. Now, the second day and I looked at Michelle, I was like, are y'all going to Yellowstone? And she said, well, I didn't think we were, but maybe we are now. So, but as we left that night, I mean, we leave Jay's house at 11:50, and we get back down to the hotel there in Hattiesburg, and we check in, and we are walking to the elevator, and literally it is 12:02, and he says, where are we going now? I'm like, Coach, there ain't nowhere open on Wednesday night in Hattiesburg. Oh, Brad, there's got to be. Well, I pull up my phone, and Patio 44 closed, Buffalo Wild Wings closed, a couple other places closed. And that's when he says, I've not been asleep before midnight since I was in the 6th grade. He said, my mama stayed up late, so therefore I stayed up late. And he said, I just can't sleep. I wish I could. Well, by then we're in our room. I'm in my room, he's in his room, and I get a text. Did you find anywhere? I was like, Coach, there's a few places. Well, let's go check them out. And all right, so early, let me back up.
I got about a minute.
Yeah. All right. Anyway, so we go in there to the karaoke bar. Is the karaoke karaoke guy and the bartender, and me and him, and in the stage, he gets up on stage and sings, and there's absolutely nobody in there. The girl's cleaning up, and I'm sitting there watching. There's nobody filming or nothing. So there's no video of it.
You had a free Mike Leach concert, Brad Peterson.
Free Mike Leach concert.
Hey, we're going to do more of this, but thank you so much for hanging out with us this morning.
Absolutely. See you both. Thanks.
All right, Brad Peterson. He is now with the Machado design group, Design to Build, out of Biloxi, Mississippi, head of business development. Brad Peterson, former coach, and worked with Mike Leach, joined us on the Yuengling Lager guest line. Phenomenal stories. We're live in the Bank Plus studio. The show is driven by your next Ram truck at Mack Hike in Flowood, MackHikeFlowood.com.